Imagine this. You're trapped in a huge, empty desert. The food is run out, hope is pretty much gone, and an entire nation is literally on the verge of starvation. This is the story of a people at their breaking point, and the absolutely wild answer that fell right out of the sky. Oof. You can just feel the tension there, right? This is not just a complaint, it's a full-blown accusation. They're saying this to their leaders, Moses and Aaron, and it immediately sets the stakes as high as they can possibly be. This is about life and death. So let's get our bearings. Where are we? The Israelites are in a place called the Desert of Sin. It's been about a month and a half since they made their big escape from Egypt, and, well, the food they packed has officially run out. They are totally, completely vulnerable. Isn't it fascinating how memory works? They're looking back on their time as slaves, but all they seem to remember now is having a full stomach. They're thinking about those pots of meats and having plenty to eat, which, is a massive contrast to the gnawing hunger and fear they're feeling now. But just as things are hitting rock bottom, the whole story pivots. All that grumbling, which was really born out of terror, gets a response, and it's a response that no one could have possibly seen coming.
Wow. I mean, just pause on that for a second. It's not, hey, I'll help you find an oasis, or there's some food over the next hill. It's, I will rain down bread from heaven. This is a promise for something totally supernatural aimed directly at their biggest, most urgent problem.
But here's the catch. This miracle isn't just a free lunch. It comes with some fine print. It's actually a test. It's designed to see if the people can move beyond their old fears and actually learn to live a new way, a way that's built on trust. Okay, so what did this food from heaven actually look like? Well, it didn't just show up all at once. It came in two really distinct parts. One part took care of their craving for meat, and the other took care of their need for bread. First up, that very same evening, a huge flock of quail just descends on the camp. I mean, it covers everything. So the promise for meat, it's fulfilled almost instantly. It's this very real, tangible sign that somebody was listening. But the real mystery, the thing that nobody could explain, shows up the next morning. After all the dew on the ground evaporates, there's this stuff left behind. It's like thin, white flakes, almost like frost, covering the entire desert floor.
And that's the question everyone is asking. You can just picture them looking at each other completely baffled, saying, Ma hu, which in Hebrew literally means, what is it? They had absolutely no idea what they were looking at.
And that's when Moses gives them the answer. This weird, flaky stuff is the bread from heaven they were promised. And its name, Manna, actually comes from their confused question, what is it? The description is just as strange. Looked like a tiny white seed and tasted sweet, kind of like a wafer made with honey. Okay, so let's get back to that test I was talking about. This miracle bread didn't just appear without any strings attached. Nope. It came with a very specific set of instructions. This was about more than just filling their stomachs. It was about learning a whole new rhythm for life. The rules were actually pretty simple. First, you only gather what you need for that day. 1 omer per person. No more, no less. This was a lesson in trusting you'll have enough. Second, and this is a big one, you can't save it overnight. You had to have faith that more would be there tomorrow. Third, on day 6, you gather twice as much. And that leads to the last rule. On the 7th day, the Sabbath, you do no work. At all. Not even gathering food. And here's the genius part. The consequences were built right in. When some people tried to hoard the manna overnight on a regular day, they woke up and it was disgusting, rotten, smelly, and full of maggots. But when they followed the rules and saved the double portion for the Sabbath, it stayed perfectly fresh. The lesson was immediate. You couldn't miss it. So the rules were clear, the consequences were obvious. How do you think they did on this test? You'd think after seeing all that they'd pass with flying colors, right? Well, you're not going to believe it. Even after seeing the quail, after seeing the Sabbath manna stay fresh while the other stuff rotted, some people still didn't trust it. They actually went out on the 7th day to look for manna, just in case. And what did they find? Absolutely nothing. Zip. The ground was bare, just like they'd been told it would be. Their own lack of trust sent them on a completely pointless search. And this little act of disobedience leads to a pretty sharp question. See, the whole thing was never really about the food. It was always about trust.
It was about whether they could finally unlearn those old survival habits of hoarding and worrying and just learn to live in a new way.
So this daily miracle, this whole routine, it wasn't just a quick fix to get them through a tough week. It became the defining reality for an entire generation. It was a lesson that went on and on for decades. And to make sure that no one would ever forget this incredible story, they were told to take a jar, fill it with one day's portion of manna, and keep it. It was meant to be a physical reminder, a piece of evidence for their children and grandchildren of what happened out there in the desert. And get this, they ate manna for 40 years. Let that sink in for a second. Every single day, for 4 decades, this miracle sustained them, right up until the day they finally reached the edge of a settled land. So, when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway here? The story of manna became this foundational lesson in depending on something outside of yourself, day in and day out. It was a constant test of obedience. It set up the sacred rhythm of work and rest through the Sabbath. And it was a miracle that just kept on going for 40 years. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? The instructions were so simple. Just gather what you need for today and trust that there will be more tomorrow. And yet, that simple act of trusting turning out to be the hardest part of the entire test. It really makes you wonder, in our own lives, when we're facing our own deserts, and the solution seems almost too simple, maybe the real challenge isn't in doing the thing, but in finally learning how to trust.